Good afternoon. It is 3 p.m. on Thursday, July 24th, 2025, and this regular meeting of the Sandpoint Urban Forestry Commission is now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I am Commission Chair Mose Dunkel presiding. Also present are Vice Chair Chase Youngdahl and Commissioners Preston Andrews. Jeff is not here yet. Or may not be, he's not present at the moment. Commissioner Paige Belfray is here.
Here.
That might have been a carryover from the previous meeting. In addition to our board members, city council liaison Kyle Schreiber and city staff liaison Eric Bush. And did I miss anybody? Oh, all right. Along with Deputy City Clerk Haley Keys serving as our board clerk today. And maybe for longer?
Possibly, I'm not sure yet.
You're welcome. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our June 26th, 2025 meeting.
I move it. Approve the minutes.
I'll second the motion.
David moved by Preston, seconded by Chase. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes and the minutes are approved as presented. Old business, moving on to old business, we will discuss and vote on definitions for heritage and other valuable trees in Sandpoint. Shows this as being ready to go.
Just about. Haley, can you share a Zoom invite?
I already sent one to you.
Oh, you already sent one to me. Oh, look, there it is. Sorry, guys. Kyle and I were in a meeting that just ended right before we came in here, so bear with me for a second. I'll go ahead and start while this is loading. We've chatted through various categories and definitions for at 2 or 3 previous meetings. And what I was hoping for today was that we can determine what those categories are, what categories we would like to adopt, with the exception of historical trees. I will be attending the August Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission meeting. We had, of course, Ellie Stuffness here last month and had her kind of thoughts and opinion, and I believe she wanted to get the opinion of the rest of her commission on the historical component. But I think we've determined as a group here, or you all have as the commission on or come close at least on the categories and perhaps definitions for those ones, with the exception of the historical one. So I am almost there. Okay, sorry about that. This is a document from Tumwater, Washington that I've had up on the screen a few times previously. But these are the definitions that we've been kind of kicking around. Of course, the first one, historical, is kind of on pause right now. But the other 3, specimen, rare, significant grove, and I believe there might have been a 4th of those that we were discussing internally. I think we should determine if those are the 3 or 4 categories we would like, and then either use the definitions included in here. I think these are pretty good definitions, maybe with a little bit of tweaking, and then perhaps take a vote on those categories and definitions so we can kind of get this item here, wrapped up or close to wrapped up.
We'll start with number one. Historical, any discussion on that one alone?
I think we're gonna come back to historical later, just.
Yeah, we can come back to it, but I suppose if there's discussion I'd like to have on that note right now, feel free.
I mean, it looks good to me, the historical, and after the historical committee talks about it, if we need to tweak this, absolutely, but this looks like a good starting place for sure.
Agreed. I think at least what I gathered from when Ellie was here with us last month. It's not, there's multiple components of what could be categorized as historical. And part of it, I think the second part of that sentence, noted citizen or historical event, I think is really critical. And perhaps location as well. It's not any of those three. It could be any of those three. It's not only one of those three. I think that would categorize under historical.
And is there a way that we can rate this so it's not exclusive? I think that's kind of what you were getting at, is it doesn't have to be all three, but say a tree presents later that does have historical context, but somehow doesn't fit our definition, something else that we didn't think of. Can we say like, may include these three?
I think May is a good option to include there, and I probably I guess we could take it case by case, but I would also add those could be, I think it's particularly with historical that those in the future, if a tree is being kind of at this table or with the Arts, Culture and Historic Preservation Commission, that those will be discussed, my guess would be individually. So perhaps the other portion of this definition is and or by review of the Urban Forestry Commission.
That makes sense to have that piece of it, then it's kind of like signed off by a group that is supposed to be looking at these things.
Yeah.
I think that gives us some flexibility in the future if certain things change that we want to keep up with, then we don't have to change, the definition. It can be malleable to fit the situation.
And there's perhaps, and I'm sure Ellie could provide us examples if we gave her time to research it. There's probably trees that are historical in nature under this definition that aren't wouldn't necessarily be categorized as a heritage tree under the specimen rare or significant growth definition. Perhaps it's not a large specimen or a rare specimen, but it's historical for some other reason. And I think that's the kind of key to that, the historical component of this category.
It's interesting that 1 and 2 both have age as a criteria in the first part of historical by virtue of its age, and also specimen age size. So, I mean, if you struck the age part and just left that in the specimen, then it would be in association or contributing to historical structures or citizens. So it would be strictly historical and
Good
not
catch.
related.
I like
Good
that.
catch.
Yeah.
I'll strike that. So a tree by virtue of its age, its association with or contribution to a historical structure or district, etc.
Could be a tree associated or contributing to historical structure. Yeah, you could strike that one phrase about that age. Virtue of.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
just
right.
take out of its age and
Yeah.
just include the rest of it with a little bit,
Yeah.
with a little bit of verbiage
Leave of it.
by virtue of.
Yeah,
its
by virtue.
association.
Yep, I'm with you. Perfect.
And then it's just, it could be association with or contribution, or it's association with a noted citizen, so it's like, it could be either of those two or you could say and or, you know, that.
Is that easier to see?
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's not.
Oh, that-
thank you.
Oh.
Sorry, I should have done that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.
Awesome.
In general, I like these definitions and having four, I guess, subcategories, you know, it's not overly convoluted, but I mean, there's enough there.
Yeah, that's kind of why I kept pulling this document up. Of course, we could make 10 categories under heritage tree, but you kind of start to muddy the waters. And I think these four in particular, really kind of grab the whole umbrella.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of maybe examples off the top of my head, I mean, a specimen tree be, maybe a random old growth Douglas fir or some, just for example, a rare would be just that, a rare species, maybe for our area. Significant grove, I mean, off the top of my head, I think a Lakeview Park, the stand in there.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think that also like significant growth and specimen, there are groves like at Lakeview Park and across the street here at the park, Pine Street Park, that can be absolutely categorized as a grove, but some of them could also be categorized as specimens. Some of the individual trees.
Within the grove.
Yeah, within the grove.
But they're not mutually exclusive. I mean,
No.
there could be just a single standalone specimen in a different context.
Right.
But yeah. So there's,
I wonder what they mean by outstanding rows. I mean, why do you need rows? Like, isn't a group, isn't a row a group?
I wonder if I'm not familiar with Tumwater, Washington, but you know, in certain contexts where it, particularly in like the southeast US where, you know, plantations of trees have been planted. I wonder if that's part of where, and maybe Tumwater has a similar thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But maybe that's where the row portion came from.
Well, maybe like on Pine Street, you know, between Fifth and First. That area of the canopy.
That's a
you
good
know,
point.
along-
Right away trees of, you know, particular blocks in town that are a row. That's a good point.
Yeah, that would encompass that, which
Yeah, I
is
think,
probably worthwhile.
I think maybe row is like another way to describe a group or
Yeah.
an area, although
It
row
might-
to me means,
maybe like
Straight line.
And line.
linear down the street.
Yeah. But for street trees, that could fit.
I didn't think about that, but that's a great,
yeah,
Yeah.
cause each individual tree along there is nice, but all of them together are, you know, it is a group.
yeah.
Put together.
And in many cases on street and the right of way, for example, if you know, we have some streets with multiple Norway maples that are big and mature, or Doug firs in a couple cases. If you only leave one of those trees and the other ones were to be removed, that tree's unlikely to remain in the long term, you know, if it's the only one left.
And I guess the other thought is that the term grove could be considered a bunch of trees that are the same species. Whereas a row could be like you're describing, where you have a line of right-of-way trees that are like a maple and a horse chestnut, and then, you know, a bunch of shade canopy trees that aren't necessarily the same species. So I don't know if I would use the word grove, but it is a row of trees that does contribute or impact the city's landscape, I guess.
I think that's a really good point. I think maybe this is overly complicating it by using the term grove and by using the term row. I mean, I think we would be saying more just by saying a significant group of trees
Oh, good.
with less words. I mean, when I had thought about the definition, and this would be another way to even rewrite this if we want to, if you guys like this idea, it can be either or, but right now we have some significant grove as an itemized thing in the list. When I thought about this initially, I thought, why not just list it as a tree or several grouped trees that fit within some of these categories? It doesn't have to be its own category. It can be right in the first sentence before we even list the categories. If that simplifies anything, I don't know how you guys feel about that. I can see it both ways, but I do think that those extra words are sort of boxing us in and creating, you know, we have all these questions and confusion. I don't know that we need all of that language.
There's no mention of the definition of species. I mean, the way I interpret, I mean, a grove could be all the same or several different varieties.
Yeah,
That'd be how I read that.
that's how I would read it too. If it said outstanding rows or groups of the same species of tree that impact the city's landscape, that would be overly complex and also limiting, I
That's
think.
true.
I mean, you
But-
look at Lakeview Park, I mean, you have what's in the canopy, ponderosa pine, everything from ponderosa pine to Douglas fir to cedar to hemlock. I
Yeah,
mean, it just comes across to me as a grove.
Yeah,
sure.
But that's,
That's a good point. I guess I usually use it with the qualifier like Aspen Grove or Cedar Grove, but yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be.
It's usually how I think of it too, is
But-
like one type of tree.
or
Yeah.
like associated like a crop and
Yeah.
almost, how you.
Paige, what was the, you said, not to remove outstanding rows or groups. Did you say substantial groups? You didn't say substantial. You said.
What did I say?
Forgot
I think
already.
it was significant.
Significant. That was it. So. How did it,
Could be outstanding too, outstanding
how about
groups.
standing or significant? How's that?
Sounds good, yeah. I think it's just, the point is that a tree or a group of trees are set apart because of the value they add to the community. For whatever reason.
I do like having grove in here because, you know, maybe a group of trees individually doesn't meet the definition of one of these other categories, but as a group, it warrants protection.
Yeah. I can, on board with that.
Well, besides the Tumwater, Washington State portion, I think the,
Yeah, remove that.
Delete.
we can change that.
Yeah.
Any discussion?
Thank-
How about we make that Sandpoint, Idaho?
Yeah,
And I think number 2, we could chat a little bit more about it. I think those are good criteria: age, size, health, quality. But the way it's written says that you must combine all of those to qualify the tree. Where I see very often what I would say is a specimen tree based on only one of those criteria. So if we write it this way, suddenly the tree, and almost no tree that is a specimen tree, like a big old tree, is in wonderful health. So we're gonna exclude a lot of trees if we write it like this.
What age, size, health, or quality factors.
Yeah, I would say or instead of and.
We probably need to remove combine, right?
Yeah.
And two
I
as
think
well.
that works.
yeah. Oh, wait.
Yeah, I think that's much stronger. I had listed one as aesthetic value. Do you think quality covers that if we just have this tree that's just gorgeous? It's just beautiful, you know? Do you think quality covers that, or do you guys think aesthetic should be one of the things we list within specimen?
I kind of like adding aesthetic, and I'm thinking particularly of smaller ornamental trees, something like a Japanese maple.
Sure.
That even when they're 60 years old and beautiful, they're still small compared to a 60-year-old oak tree
Mhm.
or something like that. And there's lots of other species. That just is the one that popped into my head. Add aesthetic.
Either that or replace quality with aesthetic.
I'd be fine with the replacement.
I think that's more.
Quality's kind of ambiguous.
It is.
It's
yeah.
pretty ambiguous,
Yeah. Aesthetic is.
Like, what does that mean? Health, yeah, it's already there.
Well, and then next in there it says unique among the species, so. I think that helps to qualify it as, that's gotta be a quality tree. You know. Cause it could read like Well, if it's an old tree, it could be a specimen, even though it has no other qualities. But I think that. Yeah. It's kind of tough. I think if you do try to combine all of them, you're gonna be. Some of them aren't gonna qualify. If you do, if you only have one factor, then it might not work either.
But that's the nice thing about running it through our committee too. We get to talk rationally about, okay, so it's an old tree. But what qualifies it beside, does it merit this definition?
Yeah,
Again, you could use that word may, if you change two factors to qualify, factors that may qualify the tree.
Mhm.
That's good.
One thing I don't really see covered in any of this is like ecological value. So a tree that's doing a really important job. Do you guys feel that maybe that belongs in here?
Like maybe it's a perennial osprey nest or something.
Yeah, it could be habitat, it could be doing a job like that, it could be taking up significant stormwater runoff and preventing infrastructure issues to the city. There's lots of trees doing lots of these things that we just don't really think about, and if we were to qualify it and say, yes, this is a heritage tree with its little plaque, people would walk by and think, wow, like trees are valuable, this is pretty great.
Shade would be something.
Yeah, shade's pretty important too.
But something that pops into my mind is those trees that were just planted along Boyer to soak up the contamination from the pole yard. You don't want to cut those down.
Right.
They're there
Right.
for a reason,
Right.
serving a purpose, an ecological purpose.
Right, yeah, we don't wanna cut them down, and it'd be great to educate the community if there were little plaques on some of our heritage trees. It would be a conversation starter for people in this community. People would notice. Not very many people come to our meetings.
I mean, does that start teetering on moving out from under the umbrella of heritage trees when you start talking about, ecological type aspects of it? I mean,
Well, I see the umbrella as adding value to our community. So I see that as valuable, but it's up to the group.
I mean, I see, acknowledging the ecological value of trees, but I almost see every tree as having ecological value.
yeah, I mean,
You
it's
know,
almost,
they all take CO2 out of the atmosphere and store it in their growth, so. But
it kind of seems like something that's inherent to me. But, I mean,
I guess there's some that are doing more significant jobs than others. Yes, they all are doing something for sure, and that impact as a whole is huge, but like the ones by the pole yard, that's a pretty unique situation. So we wouldn't be labeling every tree as significant because it's doing an ecological thing. That would be every single tree in Sandpoint.
yeah,
But it would give us the opportunity to label a few that are doing something really special, I guess.
what if we include that in the number 2 of specimen? It could be one of the factors, and because I think it does fit in the specimen category pretty good, at least for me. And that way it doesn't have to be rare or, one of the other factors that it could fit in there.
the nice thing about that is it keeps the categories.
Yeah.
Down to 4,
Slim,
rather
yeah.
than expanding it.
I think that'd be a great place to just pop it in and then in case, there is a tree that should be labeled that way. We don't have to change all of this and we can just do it.
Almost feel like maybe health could be replaced with ecological.
I feel like health is its own.
yeah,
Cause there's not a ton of trees in the urban forest that are in like really good health because they're subjected to a lot. So when you see one of those, that does make it special in this environment where we're dumping pollutants on it and doing things to it all the time. That does make it special when it's so healthy, I think.
Wondering if there's a, I like the ecological categorization wherever it fits in here. But to your point, Preston, and your point, Paige, everyone has ecological benefits. In some ways, I almost hesitate to want to include ecological in there. Not that it's not important, it absolutely is, but I wonder if it's more like tailored to something like osprey nests. Like Kyle, did you say that? Something to that effect more so than it is like ecosystem services. Because we know every tree provides ecosystem services of varying types, whether it's stormwater, CO2, shade, et cetera, et cetera. You know, but I don't know, maybe that's muddying the waters too much, and I don't know how you would categorize like an eagle's nest, an osprey nest, squirrel, whatever, yeah, whatever, you know, that can start to get pretty muddy.
Yeah.
And be less than beneficial as well.
Yeah.
But ecological is just like, of course, they all provide ecological benefit. I don't know, I've been like going back and forth in my head for the last 5 minutes as we're talking about that.
Yeah, I guess what if there's a tree that has no other importance? What if it's a really ugly tree? What if it's not in good health, but it's doing something really special, like providing this nesting habitat for an osprey, for example? And it's, somebody wants to come and cut it down. If there's no protection for it, because, it's like, oh, this is a sad, declining, ugly tree. And a lot of folks would not see the value of, oh, it's actually providing this really important habitat for this bird. This could protect that tree. Have a nice little plaque, even though it's really ugly. That says, this is what this tree is doing. This is why this tree is here and why it belongs here.
I mean, in traditional forests, a certain amount of dead snags are left intentionally for woodpecker and other bird habitat, but it's. I don't know how appropriate that is in an urban environment when there's safety issues.
Well, of course, it would have to be assessed for risk by the tree risk assessor. I didn't mean a decrepit tree that's about to fall. Sorry, the picture I painted might have sounded a little decrepit, but
But to your point, there's not so much like in a right-of-way tree, for example, if there was a dead Douglas fir that, the top came out and it's been dead for 10 years and it has no branches left, that is a risk because it could fall on the road, somebody's house, etc. If that tree was located in a park and it wasn't near a building, a baseball field, whatever, and it was a habitat for osprey or woodpeckers or name a species, that area could theoretically be kind of cordoned off. So if and when that tree does come down, it's not putting people at risk. So like I would say like in Sandpoint Park owned properties or something to that effect in that context, because in right of way context, we couldn't leave that tree. In other context, we could.
sure.
And I say parks because that's really the only larger tracts of land where something like that would, I think, be like a situation that could occur.
Mhm.
Because we don't own like other large tracts of land that are not parks or used for something to that effect.
To be
We do have some. Like the.
Fair enough, we do. You're right.
Down by the
You're
airport.
right, we do.
But yeah, I think this is more of a citywide thing, not specific to the Sandpoint owned property, so it's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I guess I don't see any harm in adding, that as ecological value, comma, but I do see harm in not adding it because it wouldn't give us the option to define a tree that way.
And again, you do have the word may, so it doesn't automatically qualify it.
Right, it would still warrant conversation.
Yeah.
I think if we put it in, we have to kind of qualify it with what the intention of it is, that, like, could we mention nest or some sort of, you know, it's a support system for something else, or, you know, so there's because 10 years from now, we're all gone, and, you know, there's a new group of people and they interpret it different than what we did, and then they're stuck with, you know, like you said, they're all doing something.
Right.
Well, I think
But I don't know if we make it like too long then.
Eric and I looked at some trees on Ella, just by the Historical Society parking lot, birch trees that are old, and you could say they have ecological value. There's all sorts of lichen and stuff growing on, and there's probably nests in there. But the tree's in pretty rough shape, and there's risk of hazard risk.
Yeah.
And so a tree like that, you wouldn't want to protect. I don't think you'd want to. If it's heritage tree, what can you do to prevent hazards?
Well, I think even if it, under any of these categories, if a tree is defined as a heritage tree and down the line becomes a hazard, that doesn't disqualify it from being removed.
Okay, yeah.
I think.
I think it lays more importance on it for having, you know, a certified arborist look at it and say, okay, is there something we can do to mitigate the risk and keep the tree?
Yeah.
Sometimes those options aren't explored, but if it has a heritage, you know, it's a heritage tree, I think that's much more likely to be, and maybe we should eventually write that in, that, you know, here's what happens with heritage trees when they are being considered for removal. Here's the steps we take first. You know, can we reduce some of these branches? Can there be a cable or a brace? Can we put a fence around it to protect, you know, there's a lot of things that people do to protect trees and retain them in these situations.
Include it in here or not include it in under specimen?
Should we vote on it?
I think we have to have a consensus. Personally, I think aesthetic kind of gives us the flexibility to throw it in. And I think in the future, it kind of feels like it's getting into a definition of, it's just gonna be a very few number of trees. But I think some of these other definitions are close enough that, like, if it's a tree with a nest in it, I think there's argument. Even if even if it doesn't fit into any of these, I think there's a good argument that is reasonable and rational, arguable. And if we're adding in that, you know, the tree commission has to review them anyway, then.
I'm fine with adding ecological as another item in that list.
Obviously, I'm on board with it. I think it gives us more flexibility and more options, or the group 10 years from now, you know, more options down the road.
So putting it is there any way that putting it in is gonna take away or harm either? I don't think it will, so. I don't think he's gonna be bound where people are gonna say, well, there's ecological benefits, so it can't be removed, you know, an argument. I don't think that will be an argument.
I think that part is covered from the or and may. Because it, you know, I would argue that the only problem I have with ecological under specimen is specimen tree has kind of a tight definition, and I think this definition is pretty tight. A tree that provides ecological value is not necessarily a specimen tree. Given this definition and other definitions, but it is the other way around, I think.
So if there was a separate
So maybe it's just number 5.
number 5, and then
Number
it
five.
could be then defined, the nesting habitat for species, you know, insert whatever XYZ species or and however else we want it defined.
Yeah, I mean, we could use something like instead of just ecological value, significant ecological value or
Unique.
unique
ecological value.
ecological value that we want to highlight to the community, something like that.
Something that sets it apart from just inherent ecological value of any
Yeah.
tree,
Yeah,
I think saying unique would cover that.
something to that effect.
are we on number 5 with unique ecological value?
Sounds like it.
Or number 5 is ecological value and then.
Provide the unique ecological benefit.
Yeah.
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 I think that sounds good. Benefit or service.
To a particular location
Maybe just
or just that?
to our community or to the city, or just leave it like that.
To the urban environment.
I like that one.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, I'm good with these 5,
So
if
we're
you
getting
are,
somewhere.
if,
The only problem I have with value in there is everything else is, historical trees, specimen tree, rare tree, significant growth, ecological value, not. Shouldn't it say ecological?
or just ecological.
Just
Or just
ecological.
ecological.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, at this point, I'd go ahead and move to adopt these categories and definitions as we've developed them here.
Only comment, do we want to hold off on historical until I can meet with
Yes.
ACHP
Yes,
at their next month meeting?
yes.
So we can, the items 2 through 4, items 2 through 5,
Yeah,
and we hold off on historical and then we can revisit that one.
yeah, I would amend my motion then to approve these categories and definitions 2 through 5, so excluding historical to be revisited after the historical commission input.
Okay, we have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, then moved and seconded by Chase and Preston, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. I think we did a good job there.
Yeah.
Okay, next we'll continue our discussion on the arboricultural manual. I think I'm getting that,
Say it 3 times. Fast.
Fast.
Yeah.
my brain was reading a different word than what my mouth said.
I started thinking about it as arboriculture, like burr cold, and that helps me get a little bit less like tongue twisted.
Very cold.
I like that.
As long as you don't like pronounce it phonetically like that, it makes sense.
We could oh, we could just make it in like the ABC or something like that, manual. What governments do, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay. Okay, so on, we moved on to the next item, right?
Yeah.
On the, now I'm messing it up. arboriculture manual update. I have been working on a number of things in the manual. I've got kind of a working document here that is graphically a mess, but that's because I'm actively working on it. So what based on our last couple meetings, when I had just chapters and chapter titles, I've started to build some of those out. So introduction, haven't gotten there yet. That'll be paragraph or two blurb. But I'll have this will be chapter 2, or maybe it's not necessary, but tree inventory. And that's just a quick blurb about the maintenance of our tree inventory that's publicly accessible. If you want to access that or review trees within the city, you're able to do that. Here's how you get to it. There's not too much in there. I might have an additional blurb in there about I maintain that inventory when trees are planted or removed that I know about. I mark those in there so they're accounted for. That's the whole point of an inventory, is to kind of keep it up to date so it's useful. So moving on from that one, definitions. I pulled these definitions out of our existing manual. And so I've been going through and tweaking some of them. But for the most part, let me zoom that in so we can all see. But for the most part, we don't need to go through these definitions today. I'll clean this document up a little bit and then I'll send it out. And everyone can review. I think there's the majority of these terms that are defined in here are, I think, pretty good. There's probably some definitions that need tweaking. I've been kind of working on that. And there's probably some terms that aren't in here that need to be. But I've also, in the existing manual, for example, drip line, there's a drip line graphic that is kind of out of date. But I intend to grab a photo of a tree in town in color, perhaps in a park, and then recreate this. And so it's not all pixelated, etc. But it'll more or less be the same type of thing. So I plan to update some of those. So I might pull these chapters out individually and have it as a separate document that we can send around and add, remove, modify, etc. And then we can review that at a next month meeting. So for example, like in the planting strip definition here, I'm going to take a photo of a street in town with a very clearly defined right of way, meaning sidewalk, curb, strip in between. And for the most part, from legal purposes, the back of sidewalk is the end of the right of way. But the right of way varies throughout town, so I can't put width, etc. on it, because sometimes the right of way is 40 feet, sometimes it's 60 feet, sometimes it's 160 feet. So that's more of a road width, curb, strip, sidewalk if you have it. If you don't have it, the note in later on in the document is, if you're not sure where your right of way ends, contact the city forester. So that's trying to not overcomplicate the definition. So let me kind of get through these and then we'll get that out. This is a pretty good graphic here, and I think there's another one in the urban forestry management plan that we can use, but defining class 1, class 2, and class 3 trees, small, medium, large, kind of. This kind of shows, and there's another graphic in the existing manual that shows like right tree, right place. So not planting a class 3 tree under power lines, not planting a class 1 tree where there's nothing overhead, those sorts of things. I like this graphic. I think it tells a story pretty well. And it's really simple. So hopefully that, can help define some of that. And then this graphic as well, this is under tree form. I also like this one, just for purposes of a homeowner or business owner. And when I'm working with folks on planting a new tree, and well, here's the types of things you should be looking for, columnar, well, that's kind of narrowly pyramidal in this, so maybe it's not as good as I thought. But these categories are, I think, really helpful if you're not a tree person. And to, get the right tree in the right place. That's the intention of that. So either this graphic or a updated version of this graphic, I think should remain in the document. And then as we keep going on, we've got a bunch of other ones. So moving into, jeez, I'm trying not to make you guys dizzy here, but I can't see it on my screen either. So chapter 4, I'm combining a couple of the categories and chapters that we talked about previously. As I started working on the actual document, I realized that it wasn't really necessary to have them broken out as individual chapters. So I think all 3 of these were individual chapters where I've kind of combined them. So clarification or responsibility for street trees. This section, well, down below, I've got the section of our city code that talks about exactly this. And that's also in our existing manual. And then above here is clarification or responsibility. This is also in our city code. And all that does is break down the difference between a right-of-way tree, a tree in a city park, or a tree on private property, basically. And then the downtown core, where Sandpoint Park staff maintains the trees in the downtown core. This is the kind of limits of what the area that they maintain versus the area that they do not. And this paragraph down here is what I was talking about. Generally, the public right of way is the area between the sidewalk and the curb. The figure is the one I'm gonna grab a photo of and mark up. And then if your property does not have a sidewalk, or you were unsure where the right of way ends, contact the city forester for clarification. I'm able to determine that on any street I've needed to so far. Maybe there's some streets in town that I would have a little bit harder time finding the right of way, but I can look up the old plats, and many of them are dated in the 50s and 60s and define the right of way with there. So that is particularly important if say there's a dead tree and it looks like it might be in the right of way or it might be on private property. That helps me determine, do I need to notify this homeowner or property owner that there's a dead tree that needs to be removed? Is it on private property, in which case I could still notify them, but I'm not able to make them do anything about it. So that's kind of chapter 4. Chapter 5 is still in the works, but I do have I was going back and forth between many of the definitions, or not definitions, the documents that the ISA prepares, like the 1-pagers on tree planting and tree maintenance, etc. And then I was also comparing that to the US Forest Service tree owners manual. And I kind of gotten to the point where I prefer the tree owners manual over the ISA document, primarily because the tree owners manual isn't limited to 1 page. So the ISA documents are great, but they're also a little bit limited. It's the really high level, it's not going to tell you all the details, whereas the Forest Service tree owners manual does, or tells you more information, not necessarily all the details. For example, in planting, they've got a pre-installation. So what you're doing, your tree will grow, right tree, right place. Really nice graphics in there that are talking about that. Check below ground, call 811. Check the laws. That means reach out to me if you're unsure. And then it goes into actual planting, how you handle a tree, whether it's potted or B&B'd, what you should use, what you shouldn't use, etc. So I can send these out as well, and we can tweak accordingly. For my purposes at a high level, I think they're pretty good. And for the purposes of this manual, of course, we could make a 600-page manual that tells you everything you need to know, but we don't want to do that. We want to keep it more simplistic and digestible. So my thought was we, in these chapters where we're referencing planting, for example, we can make our own sections or inclusions to that chapter, but I would just insert these pages of this document into the manual. The Forest Service publishes this and it is open use, so there's no copyright or anything issues with that. The ISA documents, you do have to receive permission for them. I've already contacted the ISA and figured out that process, so we could also go that direction in particular manuals. If there's particular sections of or pieces of the I think it's on their website, it's the ISA tree owner information tab or tree, something to that effect. If they've got 20 or 30 documents in there, if there's one in particular or multiple in particular that we want to include in this, I can reach out to them and request permission to use those. But we need to, I was gonna request on some of the ones I thought was useful, and then I was like, you know what, I need to wait. Because I don't want to request permission for a bunch of stuff that we're not going to use or vice versa. So this is, gets into move the tree, remove trunk, etc. And it's a pretty good document that tells a lot of, the modern planting information. I believe this version of the document was updated in like 2013, so it's relatively recent. There were some other versions that I found. The original versions were like 1998 and they weren't quite as updated. Don't put $100 tree in a $10 hole. That's pretty good, actually. So for the planting purposes, that was kind of where I was going with that. This is also like perhaps one of the, not perhaps, this is one of the items that needs to be included in here. It's kind of a written version of the right tree, right place, but certain qualifiers, don't plant trees 4 foot from a building or structure, within 10 feet of a fire hydrant or utility pole. Those kind of basic things. Those are, again, this document is primarily tailored for property owners that aren't necessarily tree care or tree people. So these, I like this, 10 bulleted or however many bullets there are in this list that, oh, you got a meter box, you need to move that tree somewhere else. And that's just basic, like, let's make sure we're not getting trees in there that will have to be removed down the line for some reason. This is the graphic of right tree, right place. It's not very easy to see, but it is a really good version of it. You've got a, tree, looks some deciduous tree that is planted directly below multi-wire, probably high energy power line. And I'm going to rely on Jeff for some of this, obviously, with his work with the Vista. He's got in-depth knowledge of what happens when a tree is planted in the wrong location and the power company or whoever comes through and does utility pruning. And I know Avista has some of that documentation as well. It might be appropriate to include some of Avista's documentation in here. This public projects, this is a piece of the existing manual that talks about sightline clearances, particularly trees around intersections. And then various other things like how they might affect sidewalk in the future or streets in the future, things like that. This, I think, probably needs to be tweaked and updated a little bit, but it is, I think, a pretty good start there. These are street tree spacing and location guidelines. These are directly out of city code, and they're, for the most part, pretty good. We could perhaps adjust some of these a little bit, particularly spacing, but I think for most purposes, it's pretty useful. This planting strip document is in the existing manual. This is I'm going to find a photo of this and update this and make it look a little bit more modern than that is. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. These are some of the additional categories we were talking about, and many of these, particularly in the 2.5 section, is stuff that's covered in the US Forest Service Tree Owners Manual. So I think we can just include those sections where appropriate in this document. Tree removal, that's and general tree permitting, there will be a, you know, section in there about that. Hey, we have a tree permit. Here's what it covers. Here's what it doesn't cover. Here's when you need to apply, that sort of thing. And then there was a few more in here that that we talked about, and yeah, so it's in the works. And for example, number 6 here, this is, you know, for contractors or construction generally, it's ANSI 300, referencing that where appropriate. And Chase, I included in here just the blurb you emailed me yesterday. Was there did you want to write an additional section, or is it just reference the IDAPA, and does that cover what we needed to cover?
Probably. I mean, I was looking at the draft. At least the draft I have access to for this manual, and this chapter was, it's like it would be starting from scratch, it seemed like. Unless you have another working.
I
draft that
don't.
We don't have access to.
I don't. I could certainly take a crack at it, but
I've got chapter 4 pruning standards. And what I'm
these
looking-
numbers have been messed up because it's, you know, a working draft, so it's a little bit out of sorts, but if you're comfortable with what IDAPA, I didn't have a chance to pull that up yesterday and read through it, but if you're comfortable with what's in there from, you know, your purposes as, you know, your job outside of this commission, I think that probably would cover us pretty well.
I mean, that's where you're gonna find the up-to-date noxious weed list and the invasive species like the spongy moth and anything else that falls under invasive insects or anything that's of regulatory nature in Idaho code. It's gonna be in 020609.
Okay. Great. As an aside, I saw this week or last week that the state of Washington statewide banned English ivy, Heterohelix. They might, I think they're the first states that's done that. There's, I think, a couple of Northeast states has considered it, but I don't know that they've actually adopted anything, and I couldn't be more of a fan of that.
Ever climbed a
bad.
tree and removed English ivy from it
Mm.
for an entire day, you will understand why they're doing this.
Okay, so point is, this whole document's in the works. Hopefully within the next month, I'll be able to refine this a little bit. I will pull out these sections and get them emailed over to you, including the ones that I pulled out of the Forest Service Tree Owners Manual, and send me notes, tweak, revise, add, etc. What I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about was approved street tree list versus prohibited street tree list. As we talked about last month, my thought is it's much more important that we have a tight prohibited street tree list than a tight approved street tree list, because there's thousands of species and there's no way we're going to categorize all of them. Many of which are probably not available locally anyways, but that's kind of besides the point. There's lots of good species of trees that could be planted and are suitable to be planted in Sandpoint that maybe somebody drives from somewhere else and they want to plant them. I don't want to preclude that sort of thing from happening. That helps us going back to our last item on rare. If we get some of those species around, and you know, maybe there's 1 or 2 in town, that's pretty cool.
Maybe we have an encouraged, you know, like a small category of like, we're really encouraging these right now to, you know, increase the diversity of our urban forest.
Yeah.
Instead of all these approved ones, which excludes a bunch of them. Here's a few that we encourage. Here are the ones that are not allowed.
That's a good idea.
Um,
I've been struggling, the last week I've been working on these lists and been really struggling with the approved list, because we could have a boilerplate list of 100 species or 200 species or something like that, but it's not going to cover them all. And I don't want somebody to pick up this manual and read it and then not plant something that is a really suitable tree if they don't reach out to me and say, hey, can I plant this? And I'm like, yeah, do it, because that's awesome. I don't want to preclude that from happening. I do want to preclude from certain trees from being planted. But that's that's the other piece. So on currently prohibited, this is what's currently in our city code. Box elder, cottonwood, poplar, willow, mountain ash, American elm, fruit trees, nut trees, ailanthus, and Oregon or big leaf maple. Generally, I think this is pretty good. I do think that we should remove the mountain ash from prohibited. Whether or not it's suitable for a right-of-way tree is another kind of argument. I tend to lean towards it is, even though they are fruit bearing, because they retain their fruit for so long. And of all of the fruit trees we have in the right-of-way, particularly in South Sandpoint, mountain ash is not one that I see as a problem. You know, there's lots of cherry trees or apple trees in South Sandpoint, but you get some stains on the sidewalk, but I rarely see a pile of fruit in the sidewalk, you know, obstructing people from walking or something like that. So not that I would approve mountain ash being planted in the right of way in particular locations, not necessarily everywhere. But I personally think that's a really interesting species and has you know, color a lot of the year that a lot of other species don't. So I'd like to remove that one from the prohibited list. And then it's kind of a, you know, case by case item. With that, the urban forestry management plan recommends a drawing a blank on the terminology, a prohibition basically on the planting of maples throughout town. And I fully support that. I was categorizing in our tree inventory the other day, and we've got somewhere between 20 and 25% of our canopy of acres. And that's problematic. We shouldn't have more than 10%, and not that we're going to remove them, but we don't want to add to that.
I agree, yeah.
So I'm gonna include Acer. I'm gonna include that in there, and once this once we finalize this document, and this actually is in city code, so once council adopts this document, we will have a prohibition on the planting of maples throughout town. Is
A quick question on that.
sure.
So if you scroll down a little bit, it says big leaf maples, I believe. Oregon or big leaf maples. So you're saying all Acer, because that's a huge family, right? Like you said earlier, Japanese maples, for example, that are, you know, almost shrubs.
Yeah,
It's very different than.
and that doesn't preclude nothing in this precludes people from doing whatever they want on private property. That's Idaho law.
Oh, okay.
But I can't really think of many cases where a Japanese maple is suitable as a right-of-way tree, for example.
Maybe under the power lines, but I guess.
Well, maybe that
It's
was,
a power
yeah,
line friendly. I mean, I personally, I'd have a hard time prohibiting, you know, the dwarf Acer species, you know, the Japanese maple varieties. But Rocky Mountain, you know, and up.
Well,
I'm fine
I think
with,
what Eric's getting at is that if we do have a disease or a pest that comes after maples and we continue to plant them and we're already at, what did you say the canopy?
between 20 and 25%.
25%, we're gonna have a huge collapse of trees in our city. So right now, we temporarily put a ban on planting just that group of trees so that there's some diversity going into our city for a period of, I don't know how long, but it would be temporary until the balance is evened out, till those ratios adjust just a little bit more in favor of having diversity in the ecosystem. Because when you get an entire collapse of 30% of your canopy, it's gonna be a really, really tough situation.
And with that said, and to your point, Chase, we could exclude, dwarf maples, Japanese maples, something to that effect within this prohibition.
Is that something that a pest or a disease typically wipes out the entire family? Cause it seems like there's some species, particularly ones from other continents, that are resistant to diseases where a native species maybe wasn't.
It depends entirely on the pest or the disease.
Yeah, it is possible for,
I think emerald ash borer, for example, is the most recent example. Any green ash anywhere, when emerald ash borer is around, they're gone.
and that's.
You
in-
can inject them, but you have to inject them yearly to save them, and that's quite a robust cost to do that.
Right.
Like
not
there's
sustainable.
there's mechanisms in the context of ash trees to save them, but it's extremely expensive. And unless you're, Morton Arboretum in Chicago or something like that, you're unlikely to, bite that bullet yearly to, maintain those trees.
Right.
And then what happens with the collapse is, once, say it's the ash, what's happening in other states right now, this insect is in 37 states now, and it's on its way here. The cities where this is happening, the entire urban forestry budget is decimated just by taking down those trees and removing the trees somewhere else. There's nothing left to even run the arboricultural programs because of the massive amounts of trees that need to be removed. So it can be pretty bad.
Okay.
So that, it sounds drastic, but I'm really, with what I know about trees, and pests, I'm in favor of this idea.
Yeah, I personally, I love maples, and I love Japanese maples and red maples and sugar maples and all of them, but in this context where we are today in Sandpoint, it would be the smart thing to protect ourselves and encourage diversity.
Okay.
And that's the only way that you're gonna get people on board in the city, is if you write it down as prohibited. Otherwise, I mean, even people will still plant them, seeing this, people love maples so much. I think it would have to be written like this to get any sort of compliance
Gotcha.
towards, I think if we encouraged it, everybody would still plant their maples,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
And there's a reason why they're so planted in Sandpoint. Our climate is really suitable for many or most varieties of maples.
They plant
Unfortunately, unfortunately, many of the maples we have are Norways, and they're not red maples or sugar maples or some of the others that are a little bit more desirable, I would say. On the other hand, there's a reason why we have so many Norway maples in town. One, because that was a trend in the 50s through the 70s, but they're also extremely tough. And, street trees live in a really tough environment, and Norway maples just keep trudging forward. They can get pounded with snowplows year after year, and they're like, yeah, come on, give me some more.
Right.
I don't care. I'm still gonna grow and be huge. And that's part of why we have so many, but it also, we're at the point where if there's a maple, an insect or a bug or a what have you that comes in that starts to affect them, we're gonna be, 25% of our canopy gone overnight or in a couple of years.
Yeah, I guess just to clarify, I was not concerned about prohibition against those big leaf maples that are already in there, but more the entire Acer species or family that's a lot of trees.
The genera, but that Acer would be the genera. Yeah.
Well, it might be worth thinking about some that we don't really see much of in the city. I mean, that doesn't help if a insect or something comes in and decimates all of the acers, but if we did want to increase some diversity, we could look at things like sugar maples, things we don't have that much of in terms of maples, and maybe include those as like, well, right now we are only allowing these type of maples to be planted, and everything else right now is prohibited, but it would be better to encourage like more oaks and
Yeah.
completely different genetic material in our collection. I think that would be safer.
Sure.
For
And-
right of way trees, I mean, that has to.
Yeah.
Have to be dwarf, so I mean, I guess I hesitate in in limiting any kind of, we're pretty much limited to zone 5, basically. Maybe zone 6. And then like I've seen golden chain trees not make it, eastern red buds won't make it. I mean, realistically, how many transmission line friendly height trees,
That's something we should brainstorm,
you know?
Yeah,
because there are
Yeah.
some, but we should brainstorm a list so we can suggest them to people.
yeah, and that would be particularly useful for me in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
Because just south of here on Michigan Street, there's 4 cherry trees, 2 of which have been removed, 2 of which have not yet. They died last year or had been dead for a couple of years. It's in front of, it's 2 kind of office parks. There's like Capstone Accounting is one of the facilities and I can get in the other building. Anyways, the property owner that's removed 2 of those trees, I've been working with for the last month or so and trying to figure out a species for them. The lines there, I don't think they're power lines. I think they're telecom, but they're like 12, 14 feet above the sidewalk. And that's a pretty limited selection. And there's some, and I think we found a couple, they're trying to see if they can track them down locally. But there's just not a whole lot of species. There's lots of species that can comply with that, but if they're available locally is the key. So, and perhaps, engaging some of the local landscape suppliers would help. If we can determine no,
I wouldn't.
but nonetheless,
Sorry.
that's a struggle I have. And when I'm encouraging people to get the right tree and you get a smaller tree when they've got overhead lines, and then it's like, here's the list. Oh, well, all these trees are 30 or 40 feet. Even the short ones are 30 or 40 feet at maturity. Even though if they're slow growing, it may be 30 or 40 years until they get there, but they're affected by utility pruning down the line. So I'm trying to think long-term here.
Yeah.
And every venue is different, every little street spot, it has different conditions. It's like, is there a heat dome effect here? Are these different kinds of pressures? So that's where having a certified arborist who is knowledgeable come in and do consulting on that particular location. But there are arborists, we do that. There are other arborists in town who do that. So something for you to throw out to these people who are like, what can I plant here that will succeed and will not get too tall? That's where you need that expert knowledge, so.
And yeah, so this is, those are kind of the prohibitions, and this is the list that's included in the urban forestry management plan, which differs from the list in the existing, arboriculture manual we have. I'm gonna combine these 2, obviously, right at the top here, there's a bunch of, acers. But this is a larger list, and this management plan was adopted in 2020, 21, 22 recently, as compared to 2002 with the manual. So there are species in here that are particularly varieties of species in here that didn't necessarily exist or weren't commercially available at the time. So I'm going to combine these, and if we end up moving forward with kind of an approved list or a what was the term you used, Paige?
Like an encouraged
list or something to that effect.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can still have a generated list that I can provide to folks.
Yeah, that'd be
If you
great.
don't know what
When
tree
they need
you
it.
want, start with this list, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. But in the context of like diversifying, I'm thinking particularly of species like Japanese Alcova and species that aren't
Yeah.
necessarily native to the US or Idaho, but have been around in the US for a while, and we have documented examples of them not being invasive or not being problematic in other ways. And I want to encourage the planting of those. One, and the case of Alcovas, they're just a really cool tree. But there's lots of other ones out there that are great trees, and many of them are great right-of-way trees. And if we can start to encourage folks to plant some of those, it's only going to benefit us.
Yeah. There's a great website, Urban Forestry Today, and they have a whole archive of webinars that's free. You can just go watch them anytime you want. And I think there are 3 different like roughly 1 hour series on tough trees for tough urban sites. So for anybody who's wanting to spend a little time putting together a list, that's a good starting point. He's very knowledgeable.
Awesome. Going back, and then I'm done with the manual update here for today. In prohibited, I would also, I don't know that it's included in this document or the urban forestry management plan, but I would also like to include iris, like Bradford pears, in the prohibited
yeah.
list.
Yeah.
We have plenty of documented examples that those are not a good tree for a
Please
lot of
include
reasons.
that.
I could point some out to you in town.
Yeah, I know. what you're talking
They're very fast growing and they've got really weak wood. And they get big in a hurry and then they break in a storm.
The one comment I had about this was you mentioned earlier the ash trees that are susceptible to the borer. Should we consider
Yes.
putting that on there as
Yes.
well, so that we
Yeah.
don't end up with the situation that you were just describing?
Yes, I was just gonna say the same thing.
Okay,
Let's add ash to the list.
and that's different from mountain ash, right?
It
Yes,
is.
mountain ash is
Yeah.
not a true ash.
Right.
Yeah, so mountain ash is okay. Yes, the joke is what's the right way to prune a Bradford pear?
Cut it down.
One large heading cut at the base.
I loathe those trees. When I lived in the east, there's so many cities that in the 90s planted thousands of them.
Yeah.
And they got 40 feet tall in 10 years and everyone's like, oh my God, they're amazing. And then a big windstorm comes through and they all break. And they're so tough, the tree won't die. It can break 4 foot above the ground, completely shear off, and it'll still shoot suckers out. But that's not what we want.
No.
That doesn't result in a strong, healthy, or suitable tree. So with that said, I'll break these groups out, chapters out, and kind of pull the references together that I've been utilizing, and then let's tweak them accordingly. And hopefully in the next month or two, we can get this pretty close. And because this document is referenced quite a bit in city code, it will have to go under legal review as well, to make sure it complies and et cetera from their purposes. Further, because it's referenced in city code a lot, one of the next things I would like to do is work on update of city code. In many of those contexts, there's certain pieces we won't be able to touch, but from the urban forestry perspective, there's that code was written a long time ago, and needs some modern revisions.
May I comment on the sort of overall organization of the manual and like the users of it really quick? I think a couple meetings ago I had touched on this. Sounds like we're in agreement that the goal of the manual is to help homeowners, right? Not professionals. Is that correct?
Yes and no. It is generally for like all of the things that we've gone through in the last 20 minutes or however long it's been is primarily for homeowners.
Mhm.
There is
I guess things like line of sight and those are city specific, but contractors would need to abide by those elements. That makes sense to me.
yes, and I thought it was, oh, here we go. This can either be probably an appendix or another chapter at the end. And this is the section for tree care professionals. Primarily, it's just going to reference ANC 300, but there are additional things that we want to include in there that require drafting text for it. But generally, here's the standard.
Okay,
This is what we use.
okay.
So
That sounds good.
it's not to, I see this manual as being primarily beneficial for a home or property owner. But if you're a tree care professional or a contractor generally that's doing something, adjacent to a tree or what have you, this needs to be also included in the document. We don't need to have 20 pages of text about it. We need probably a few paragraphs or a couple pages and then reference ANC 300.
Okay. So you had pulled some text from the US Forest Service, and you are copy pasting that. And then you mentioned some of the documents from the ISA as well. you're copy pasting those, you're not linking to electronic versions of those that are updated?
I, yes, for inclusion in the document primarily because we have quite a number of folks that will come into City Hall and say, do you have a arboriculture manual? And one of the front desk staff will print it for them.
Oh, they need a physical.
So I want that information to be included in the document.
Okay.
My preference would be to link to it.
Yeah.
And if it's, web-based, that's easy.
Yeah,
Because then we'd get the most updated version if they tweak those documents.
that's what I was getting at is, these things are updated all the time and, when we're all not here and maybe you're not here, who's gonna be making sure that that text block is copied and pasted into this manual? Cause right now we're dealing with the aftermath of a pretty outdated manual and we're fixing it, but if there's a way that we could keep the electronic version of this simply linking to those sections, I think that would be really
We can
slick and organized.
have to figure out, that's probably a question for legal since it would be an adopted document. But maybe on our webpage, on our website, when you can navigate to the arboriculture manual, there's a print version and a web version or something like that. And the print version has the documents included in the text and the web version refers you to links.
Yeah.
And maybe even better, we also have there's a section in somewhere and maybe it's its own chapter that just, for additional tree care information, visit the ISA website at here. And that kind of covers us from both perspectives, I think.
Okay. That sounds great. And then, so I had brought up a couple meetings ago, the ANSI A300. I'm not sure if it was clear. I just wanted to kind of say this one more time. So the ANSI A300 is mostly for professionals. It's this huge document. I have the electronic, the 2023 is the current version. These are the older ones. It's 125 pages long. There's a lot of definitions and things. Some of it is still redundant to some of the things that I saw on screen today. And so we had talked about maybe taking out redundancies, and referring people, to these documents that are updated all the time. And then I remember there was a little bit of debate about, well, this is kind of like hard to digest, that each section is one of these and it's like definitions and hard to digest. However, I just wanted to show you guys, and if you want to look at this after, so each piece comes with this technical knowledge, tree professionals can read it, but then that piece also comes with a best management practices book. And this is very digestible. This is like for homeowners, this is like a paragraph. Here's part 5 on planting and some paragraphs about drainage. There's a nice graphic here. So I don't know, Eric, when you were talking to the ISA about using their literature, if you were talking at all about using the BMPs, the best management practices, or if you were just talking about like the homeowner manuals and things.
It was a little bit of both, but
Okay.
I've seen that document, but it's been a while since I've looked at it.
Feel free to,
yeah. If there's, I guess it's a question of copyright. If we're able to get access to reproduce or link to that
yeah,
without, requiring like ANSI 300, you have to purchase a license for or purchase the document.
it is
Obviously, we don't
time-consuming.
want to reference those and then have homeowners click on that and go from there.
Right.
But if we're able to reproduce that, or we can maybe buy those or buy access to the link and then, have them at the front desk or what have you,
Okay.
that would be great.
Yeah, I just feel like, because these are like, there are teams like us that sit down and review all these hundreds of pages of stuff and they're professionals in the industry doing it. So we don't need to redo all that work. We won't be able to do it as well as they're doing it, so why recreate the wheel is all I'm thinking.
Yeah, and that's, to that point, the stuff that I was referencing either in this document, either ISA or the Forest Service Tree Owners Manual, it's exactly in service of not recreating the wheel.
Yeah.
Like, and if there's a better version of this or that section, that's publicized somewhere else, let's use that. I was using these because they're digestible and they're easily available. And the
Yes.
Forest Service is, whatever the terminology is non-copyrighted or open source or what have you. So we can we can reprint that without, permission from them.
Okay. Yeah, that was my only comment is like, let's maybe not, we were gonna try to slim this document down, right, quite a bit and not be redundant with all the categories that are like more for professionals. I mean, if there's overlap because people want to plant trees, but professionals are out there planting trees too, and they're doing it wrong. For example, we have the situation at the park with all the newly planted trees, and if those professionals had abided by these things, there wouldn't be burlap on those trees. They wouldn't be staked wrong. They wouldn't be buried too deeply. So that's why I'm visiting this. I just think it's really important for us to, if we're gonna redo this, let's really brainstorm it so that the people who are doing the job and getting paid to do it are forced to abide by the correct ways of doing it. There's some, accountability for those things. That was mostly what I'm getting at with that. That's all.
Thank you. All right, that's all I've got on this item for today.
Thank you, Eric. On a new business, we have none. And we'll move on to general announcements or comments. This will be the opportunity for general announcements and comments from the commission and staff.
Has anyone noticed the giant dying or dead elm on Boyer?
North or south?
We're on Boyer.
It's just past Winter Ridge heading into South Sandpoint. There's a pair of them right there, two big, beautiful trees. I drove past the other day and
East or west side?
if you drive past Winter
Going
Ridge
south.
on Boyer, it's,
On the,
yeah, going south,
on the east.
it's on the left side. Yeah, anyway, I'm pretty sure it's I drove by pretty quick, but, I was just wondering if anybody noticed an issue there, and I don't know if you have plans for, like, if an elm does die, does it get tested for Dutch elm disease?
I don't know, and I think I've noticed that tree. I notice a lot of trees and a lot of them are in my head while I'm driving and I don't always get to write them down. But I'll go look at that. And that's a good question on the Dutch elm. We don't have very many, so I haven't really had to confront that.
It's a cool tree. I don't think there's hope for it, but it would be good to know if we have Dutch elm disease. That would be a important piece of information. I was also curious about an update on the trees that were planted at Travers Park. If the contractor's done anything to.
Contract's still open. We can't comment. Contract's still open.
So at this point, just as an arborist, I've seen the trees, they're in pretty poor shape now that they've been improperly planted and with the hot temperatures that we've had.
That's why we have a warranty.
Yeah, if I were to go there and do an assessment, I would say you need to throw them all away and start over, so just so you know.
Okay.
It needed to be remedied in the spring, not the summer. So just my 2 cents on that. Is there any update on there was the road development project, we talked about the trees, there was one big silver maple that we talked about, are there any updates there?
Nope, project's on hold.
Okay,
Cedar?
yeah,
The cedar redesign.
Yeah, that'll be a while, from what I've heard.
Probably next summer, but I am the only project manager as well as the only city forester, so there's only so much I can handle
yes,
in one given time.
Understood.
So that project is on hold.
okay,
I will say that the city council held a workshop to rethink the layout of that street, and there's enough change that I think they're gonna have to significantly redesign it. And part of that redesign was putting a price tag on how much saving that tree is gonna be. So at least we know, instead of just saying, oh, well, yeah, it's gotta go, we're gonna say, if we're gonna save it, this is how we're gonna do it, this is how much extra it's gonna cost. So that's the update that I have for the city council workshop.
so that'll
But it's pushed the project back from, instead of starting this summer, it's maybe gonna start next summer.
Okay, so
Maybe not
then
even
the
next summer.
city must be contracting an arborist to put a price tag on that, or how is that?
There's been no movement.
Okay,
Yeah. I
Project
think-
is literally on. hold.
okay, I understand.
Yeah.
And it's also gonna take street design to get
Yeah.
around it, so it'll be more than just an arborist.
Yeah.
But also,
Cooperative team.
yeah, how do we design the road to get around it?
Okay. Gotcha. Cool, thanks.
I got two brief updates. The traps for the spongy moth were deployed 2 weeks ago. All 167 or however many the number was. I know where they are and I haven't noticed any traps, so IDL did a pretty good job of obscuring them so they couldn't be damaged. If you follow the bee, there was an article in Tuesday's paper about the spongy moth trapping and what its effects are, and et cetera. I was interviewed by one of their reporters last week, and he also reached out to the entomologist I've been working with at Idaho Department of Lands. So I was excited that he wanted to write an article about it, because for me, any publicity about trees in our urban forest is a win. And he wrote a nice article. So if you haven't seen it, go look it up. It was pretty cool. And it's the bees brand new reporter. He came to the first city council meeting like 2 weeks ago. And so he was chomping at the bit. He was excited to hear not about the spongy moth, but about what's going on in the system and all that stuff. So that was a win anytime we can get more publicity about our trees and urban canopy and all that stuff. And the other quick update was what Preston talked about earlier. Preston brought 3 birch trees to my attention on Ella, on the kind of adjacent to the museum. We've engaged contractor to do some work on those. One, the main stem will be removed, but there's some suckers coming up, so we're not going to remove the stump, so the suckers can hopefully do their thing. And the other 2, we're going to be able to maintain with some heavy pruning, and we'll revisit them in a few years. So pretty minor, but they're also nice birches, and it's pretty cool. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. I'm happy we're able to get that way. Tentatively, I think it's like August 8th or 9th that they're going to be in to do that work.
I'll let them know.
And I've been,
Or will you-
I'll talk to you after, but yeah, that's what I've got.
The parking lot project. I've noticed that there's not any mulch been added around the trees that we did preserve in the parking lot.
Yeah, our parks guys don't have time to do it. They are
So
running ragged.
it's almost not worth saving the trees if we're not gonna do the very simple step of mulching them.
That's the answer I got.
They will die. I'll just tell you that. It's just a matter of a few summers. They did get some root disturbance. And now there's much more of a heat dome effect in that parking lot. And the cedars struggle with the climate change. So all it would take is contacting an arborist to drop a load of chips and shoveling them on 3, 4, 5 inches deep around the entire tree well. It would be a day of work or less for a crew of guys to do. So it's very important. If we put in how much did the city spend to have us meet and have city staff here at those meetings to save those trees? Is it worth it to put mulch on them? And the answer is yes. So I just needed to bring that up because we are in the hot summer months, and this is unfortunately when the trees suffer from that effect. So just needed to throw that out there. I would be remiss as an arborist if I didn't say something.
Is there irrigation on those trees at all? No.
No, that's the problem. They have no source of water. They were disturbed by the project, and the mulch would significantly help them with water retention and moderating the soil temperature. So it's very important. If there's anything that can be done to get city crews on it. I saw the city crews leaf blowing around City Hall yesterday. I don't think that needed to be done.
I can speak to the city crew, they're, like Eric said, they're, especially this time of year with there's a bunch of fall sports starting, fall activities starting, so a lot of the fields and parks and stuff are, and then festival
Festival.
and everything, it's, and I don't think how many on the crew? It's like,
There's like 5 on the parks crew, like 6 on the streets crew.
yeah,
There's very, very slim
Yeah,
resources.
but we talked about this months ago. There was a lot of time. You know, and there was agreement that mulch was important, so.
Speaking of mulch, is that organization called, well, it's a service called Chip Drop
Yep,
around,
yep, chip drop's great.
and could that
Yeah,
provide?
yes, you sign up online, it takes 5 minutes, and then a crew will, when they've done a project in your vicinity at your address, they'll just drop off their load of chips.
I mean, could that happen there?
Absolutely, as long as the city were to sign up for it. Yeah. In other news,
Okay, there are arborists using it then.
yes, there are local arborists using chip drop. In other news, the library who I personally, my business partnered with to put on an Arbor Day celebration this year is curious and interested about partnering with the city for Arbor Day 2026. So I know it's a little early, but I just want to plant that seed because they're excited and they're already talking about it. And I think it could be a really strong partnership to have the library on board. They have staff resources, financial resources, and enthusiasm. So I'll put that out there if we want to discuss that at a future meeting.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
You said East Bonner County Library?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
okay, with no further business, I'm gonna wrap it up. We're really close on time anyway. Thank you for everyone's attendance. Thanks, Eric. Thanks.
Can I raise an
Haley?
issue?
Like I said, I think we're close on time. Is it something pressing?
Yeah, kind of. I'm sure you all know the Norwegian maple on the corner there, Farm and Park. That's done. I don't know if you've looked at it lately, but basically one whole huge half of the tree seems to be dead. The city paved over a huge amount of the drip line back. I'm not sure how many years ago. I'm here because John Gaddis and I have been talking about that tree and what can be done, if anything, and he's been in consultation with the Spokane Teachers Credit Union that has the little dealing there, what do you call it?
ATM?
Yeah, ATM machine. And they're covering over the drip line of the drip zone and the other compaction and all of that. It's a hazard now. Smaller branches could start falling at any time. Though half the tree could fall at any time. I would really like to see the city, the tree committee, whatever, look into whether there's anything that can be done. And to consider and to plan in the future that we don't do that as a city, that we don't cover over with impermeable paving. You know, maybe we could look into permeable paving that lets water and air through, so on. In the meantime, we have a beautiful old tree that's that's dying. And maybe it can be, maybe it can be saved, maybe not, I don't know. But as far as I think I would urge the tree committee to recommend looking into systems of permeable paving. I think it's more and more science going into that. It's kind of an urgent situation with that one tree. Maybe will be for others soon. So.
All right, thank you for your comment, and it's been noted. And Eric, you've heard the comment, so. Any other discussion? Okay, meeting adjourned at 4:42. All right. Thanks, everyone.